Well, hello again, everybody in Empowered Soul Network land. I'm excited again. This is the second interview of the day today. Got one more later. And I am with Michael Kolbeck of Des Moines, Iowa. Excited to talk to Michael because I've heard him speak many, many times. Just got a great flair for helping self understanding and personal development and spiritual awareness. He is an ordained minister. He is a black belt in martial arts, some version of martial arts, not sure which one it is, some version of that. And we're happy to have you here today, Michael.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Thank you very much. I'm glad I could be here today, and I thank you for this opportunity. It's going to be wonderful.
You bet. Well, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're passionate about these days. And I know you wanted to, at some point in the half hour, address this feeling of self abandonment and coming back home to self and so on. So,
Right.
what's floating the boat today, brother?
Gosh, I think it's kind of funny, but the thing I'm most passionate about is kind of using my story in some manner, way, shape, or fashion, to kind of help others. And you mentioned self-understanding as we were starting off there, and I think pretty much that's kind of been a part of the welcome home journey to myself is gaining that self-understanding. And yeah, martial arts that you've alluded to, love martial arts. That's probably one of my biggest passions right now, and probably the biggest reason for that being one of my big passions, and it really always has been, is uh, because you learn so much about yourself. It's all about yourself, and diving deeper and facing those challenges and facing those fears and overcoming those things.
On that particular subject with the martial arts, I mean, I have a ton of friends that I've never actually done it. My son was in Taekwondo, so I was able to watch it and observe it. And I recognize what they tell me that they've learned. But for you, what were the most powerful points of shifting? Was there a particular fear? Was there fear of being hurt or something? What was the thing that struck you?
Yeah.
And then if you could go then into what have you seen in other people that seems to be the overriding thing?
The overriding thing in terms of what they are looking for,
The
or
challenge in martial arts,
the
what they have to
challenge. Okay.
face. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so way back when I taught Taekwondo, back when I was a teenager, close to my 20s, I was a black belt in that, and was teaching and in more group classes and that type of setting. And that was very interesting. In the latter years here recently, I've trained more in just ninjutsu, and it's made up of White Tiger Kung Fu, which is a southern style of Shaolin, and comes from Bok Fu Pai branch or family, and it encompasses some Tai Chi, some ninjutsu, some Kung Fu, just all the good stuff. And one of the greatest challenges I've had a number of them along the way, of course, but I remember one specifically because Taekwondo is very much linear. Taekwondo is
Hmm.
very much there's linear. You maintain your distance with the opponent. You manage your distance with the opponent because Taekwondo is 70% kicks. So you want to have enough room to be able to get your kick off.
Right.
And in the new training that I've had in the last number of years, it's very much okay. Let's look at things from a more practical aspect and more of a self-defense aspect. And one of the things I had to overcome was, in some respects, managing that distance. If my instructor was to come up and say, okay, here I am, I went into panic. And I could feel that internally in my body,
Hmm.
that, I call it, I'll use nice words on this, but I call it the oh crap zone.
Right.
Yeah, because you're being flooded at that moment with, this does not feel safe. This does not feel comfortable. I don't like this. I want to get out of this. And my go-to mode from my background, my previous training and stuff, was to get out and manage that distance. But we were learning a lot of things that can only be executed in close range. And you want to be in close range in the things that we were practicing so that you can sense and feel what the other is doing, and you can sense and feel that shifting of their weight and different things like that. So that was very much a moment. Those are those moments I kind of call that shadow work, because you're completely outside your comfort zone. What you're working on is brand new. It is likely to elicit internal things within you that's saying this is not a safe play. I don't feel safe in this, even though I know logically I'm in a completely safe environment right now. This is the perfect environment to work through something like this. And yeah, I think a lot of people get into martial arts in some respects to face those challenges, those internal challenges, and overcome those and see themselves constantly leveling up and moving higher and higher in the progression of themselves. Um, I think a lot of people also get into martial arts, though, depending on the setting. Group classes are always very different than private classes. Uh, it depends on what they're looking for, what kind of where that will go with them.
So, as I was listening to that, if we weren't talking about martial arts, I almost could imagine that we were talking about being a coworker having to confront a bully in the workplace or
Absolutely.
confront a belligerent boss or something like that. So if how would you suggest that people who need to face that kind of challenge that aren't into the martial arts, what are some of the ideas or principles that could help that person to begin to navigate and create the space they need? And are there any
Hmm.
tips or keys that you can overlay over here?
Well, I think some of it would come down to it's that old saying of, your triggers light the way, or what you fear, um, uh, kind of face everything and rise. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you go head on into it. And
Hmm.
that's one thing that I like about martial arts, and the type of martial arts that I've been practicing. It's more about being in the flow. So I teach Tai Chi, group Tai Chi classes on Wednesday night, and there's that masculine feminine principle there. There's that yin yang principle there, but it's about being able to be rooted and being able to be grounded in yourself, but also being able to be in the flow. And I think that's very applicable for something like a situation where you were bringing up, where okay, maybe there's a challenge at work, maybe there's something going on, maybe it's a difficult conversation. Maybe it's not even a bully situation, but it's just a difficult conversation with a partner, with a friend, with anybody in your life. That's the challenge. That's that oh crap zone that I was talking about when I'm in martial arts practicing.
Right.
And it's the same type of thing. It's that same type of dynamic. So if you're feeling that this is a situation where you're feeling, I'm going to go to my default mechanisms. In my old past, I would try to manage the distance, which means I'm going to move away. And for many people, I think that's depends on your personality types and different things. Some can be like they're just going to attack it and go straight in. That's generally counterproductive. Some are going to want to ignore it and just want to avoid it. That's also can be very counterproductive. So I think you have to find that balance of, okay, here's the situation. And sometimes what we'll do in martial arts practice a lot, at least what I'll do, is there'll be something that we're working on in class. And then when I come home and I have my own time, I sit down and I'm trying to visualize that that practice again that we were doing, and saying, all right, I'm in that space, I'm in that place. What does this feel like? And kind of come home to those feelings that are there. And you can very much apply a principle like that to any of these situations that we're bringing up. It's have that visualization first with yourself, be seated and be grounded in yourself really before you decide which direction you want to go, because that will make all the difference in the world in the way that you approach that situation.
Yeah, it's almost like the feeling of rather than being reactive, I'm being responsive.
Right.
I'm not jumping,
Absolutely.
I'm taking my time to assess. And, a good friend of mine from Puerto Rico once said, you have to figure out if you want to fight the bull coming at you or if you want to put the cape out and just go Olay.
Right,
It's your choice, right?
right. And
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that people have to get away from is the fact that um, nothing's perfect. It will be messy. So sometimes those conversations, those challenges, whatnot, sometimes they will be so smooth you'll just blow right through them. You'll be like, "Wow, that was so easy." You know, there'll be other times where you're going to trip, you're going to fall, you're going to stumble, and you're going to learn things along the way. And it's that progression. It's like, okay, that didn't work so well this time, but I learned something from it, and I'll take it into the next situation that's similar like that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a beautiful segue into, talking about, the self-abandonment idea that you shared of experiencing and coming back to self. And I know I don't know how deeply you want to share about it, but I know you had some physical challenges that you overcame
Right.
and so on. Would you like to share about that and the lessons from that? Because everything you just apply to that very poignant personal situation, right?
Right. And I think, yeah, try to shorten that up here a little bit in terms of so I was always a very other oriented person. My whole belief system was structured around serving others, but generally servanthood was equated with sacrifice of self. And whether that was the way it was taught, uh, I can't say per se, but that is absolutely the message I received. And so that was my own internalization of the experiences that I had. And so I had a different set of rules. There really wasn't any concept of self for me. And I was always searching for this place that like I refer to as home. And I would generally find that first I'd found it in religion, then it was through partners. Oh, this is the one. This is the, there was almost this is the magical thing that's going to fix and take care of everything and make everything just perfect. And what I realized through all of these things, this pattern kept showing up was the simple fact that came to the realization that um, I was actually seeking myself because I had no sense of self. I was always operating from a sense of what does everybody else need, and I would meet that. And subconsciously, what was happening probably was if I can meet their needs, then I can get in return what I'm looking for. And that really doesn't work out that well. The irony of all this is going into the health issues thing is that at least this is my belief for myself, doesn't necessarily apply to anybody else who has had similar situations. But uh, through this abandonment of self, I certainly didn't have my own voice, my own opinions. I would shove those things down and shove those things down. Conflicts, I would not go into conflicts because there was never any good reconciliation or outcome to any conflicts. It always felt like you would just lose even more. And so everything that was very near and dear to me generally felt like it was pushed down. The irony of all of this is when I finally had enough, and it was the pain of life that drove me to that point. And there's almost this powerful feeling of standing up and internally saying enough. But the ironic thing is, the only thing I knew was that I couldn't do what I was doing anymore. I had to figure out another way. So I went through years and years of various things, including martial arts, that all helped me kind of come back to myself, that all brought me back to let's start with the self here. And I found out that was the thing I was missing all along. Now, when it comes to the health situation, the irony about it was once, right when I was just starting to get things figured out, it felt like all of a sudden it's like, hey, guess what? You got stage 3 rectal cancer. And I was like, excuse me? And so that really became the next challenge. And I had to go through a lot of different things on that because I first went an alternative treatment approach. And after 9 months of that, went in, had some, through the prodding of some others, I went in and sought standard treatment and didn't have any intention of doing standard treatment. But these particular doctors that I spoke with were so wonderful. Next thing you know, I was doing all the standard treatments, and it was a good thing because at that point, it had progressed even more. I was just like a hairline away from stage 4. So,
And so inside of all that, how were you able to um, position yourself and pivot around this new coming home, and what
yeah.
were some of the keys to maintain it through suddenly this new challenge, only it's even more challenge?
Yeah, this new challenge was met with some angst and anger, but a whole lot of fortitude as well. And by fortitude, I mean there was this internal power that I had finally found. And I remember writing on a notebook, it just moving forward was the title of the notebook. And I did certain things like, I have a journal entry in there of me sitting at my 95th birthday eating pancakes because I love pancakes. And so it really kind of heightened that thing of this is where I have to be. This is what's knocking at my door right now. This is what I have to be present with. To me, it was all a practice in being present to myself and to the reality of what was, which was something I had not done most of the years of my life. I'd always was always too busy making up stories about the situations at hand, which kept me in the same perpetuating cycle. So the battle with cancer, the path of cancer, it really gave me the opportunity because it shut down everything else in my life. It was the first time I went on unemployment. I never experienced that before. I had never experienced my body not working before the way I wanted my body to work. And as the chemo treatments begin to compound and all the different things go along with that, and the radiation and the surgeries and stuff, there were many times where I couldn't do anything with the vertigo and the side effects and different things being so bad, except sit in the chair. And when you sit in the chair or lay in the bed, you're forced to be present with what is. And so there was a lot of powerful experience that came out of that, uh, I guess, opportunity to have everything else removed off the plate and say, this is what you're doing. You're fighting cancer right now. This is where you need to be. I think that provided me with just massive amounts of growth.
So I ask versions of this question because it's always so interesting to me to hear the response. If the Michael of today were to share with the Michael of 3 years ago, what would Michael today be saying to Michael 3 years ago?
Yeah, I've often thought about that, and it's like an unanswerable question for me because of the simple fact that the Michael of old would not be able to accept or receive even the simplest of words from me.
Mm.
Even if I went back to him and said, you've got to love yourself first, you've got to value yourself. Everything, all your experiences of life, all your relationships, everything are built from this foundation of self, from this rootedness and this groundedness in self. And it's not selfish in any way. You have to have that at your core. But I know the old Michael so well that the old Michael would have just immediately flipped it around and said, oh, this is the message I'm supposed to give to others. But that old Michael would not have received and internalized and embodied any of that um, good information.
Yeah, so some of the things that I'm taking away from this conversation is that there's a real umbrella of everything of needing to take the time to become
Right.
self-aware because you had that you had that as you were, and then all of a sudden you got the cancer diagnosis, and then you had to do even more of it because you couldn't do anything else except sit there and be self-aware, right?
Right.
And so it's
Right.
like, so taking the time, you mentioned journaling or, taking out, moving forward. I mean, I could see how I could apply that to a project I'm working on, a
Right.
relationship that I want to increase the communication with or whatever. I have to come here in any of that. I can't expect, if I'm hearing you right, I can't expect a solution to come from outside.
Correct. Correct. And I had to surrender. I had to surrender, and it comes back to that balance we were talking about before, which is why I love martial arts so much. I had to surrender into the truth of what was.
Yeah.
There was no denying it. I tried to deny it for a while. That only got me into more trouble. But also coupled with that surrender, within that surrender, and from that place of surrender, then I could choose a response and say, okay, these are the cards that are dealt right now. But from here, this is where I'm going. And I had to stay in the flow of what is. It wasn't about forcing something and trying to make something happen. It was a combination of both, of saying, my intention is to overcome this. My intention is to go forward, but I also am surrendered into the reality of what is here as well.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a great lesson right there because you're saying that if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that I have to acknowledge the facts of what's happening now. I'm
Right,
overweight or I'm smoking too much. My lungs
right,
are starting to feel bad. This is where I am. Now that I said that and acknowledge that, now I can easily move forward. But if I don't do that, I'm always escaping, trying to figure
right,
it out here rather than this is the reality. Is that what you're
right,
saying?
right. Yep, yep. You have to have that. I call it the mirror of truth. You have to be
Beautiful.
able to look into, and that is the mirror in most of my relationships I avoided for so long because I knew what the answers were. Deep down, I knew what the answers were, and I didn't want to face those answers. So I kept looking for all the escape tunnels, for all the other paths, for everything else. Fact is, they all lead back to that mirror of truth at some point.
That's beautiful. What a great this is a great interview, Michael. This is great lessons that we'll tag people here, to make sure that they have a chance to listen to the replay of it if they haven't been listening to it live. And man, just beautiful universal lessons. It doesn't make a difference what religion you are, what culture you are, what your background is, male, female, old, young. Those are life lessons right there.
Right.
Thank you so much for sharing. Any last words as we wrap up here?
Uh, Gosh, no, I think you kind of named it before that you have to start on the inside. And there's an old saying that says, there can be no war without if there's no war within.
Mm,
And I love that saying because it talks about that. It's basically that law of correspondence, the as above, so below type of thing. And you really have to. My internal world is such a place of peace now, and I love that fact. That's what I was always looking for before, and I still can very much distinctly remember, if I put myself, my mindset in the old Michael, uh, that most people don't have that internal sense of
right.
peace and contentment and joy. And it's a beautiful thing. That's what I call coming home to self, is is being able to operate from that place where you're rooted, you're grounded in yourself, you have an internal sense of peace. And from there, then you can choose very consciously how you want to show up in the world and how to live your life.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Michael, how can people get in touch with you?
They can look me up on Facebook here. You can also check me out on YouTube. I've got a channel out there called Michael Kolbeck's Rise Again, and I'll probably put that in a comment here.
Yeah, do that
Link
underneath
to
the
this. And I've got some music out there. I find a lot of catharsis through music. So I've created a lot of music, which is basically a representation of me going through all of these experiences I've had.
Amazing. Hey guys, Empowered Soul Network, make sure you connect with Michael. Wonderful interview. Thank you so much for joining us today. Yeah, and look for the comments below for Michael's links and YouTube channels and so on. Michael, thank you so much. That was great. Really appreciate
Thank
you.
you, Paul.
Take
Appreciate
care.
it. Have a good one.